The city glittered like it owed him something. From the 42nd floor of a private glass penthouse, he stood motionless, hands behind his back, watching the skyline bleed into midnight. Below him, the streets pulsed with life. Above him, helicopters carved quiet paths across the clouds. But inside this room, power was silent. He wasn't just a mafia boss. He was the underworld's final decision. Men twice his age waited for his nod. Rivals lowered their voices when they said his name. Judges stalled cases. Politicians returned calls. And tonight, he was closing the deal that would make his empire untouchable. Across a long marble table sat emissaries from a rival crime family, old money, old grudges, old violence. The air between them wasn't hostile. It was calculated. Crystal glasses reflected the chandelier's cold light. Contracts sat untouched. No one moved until he did. His phone vibrated. A small sound, almost disrespectful in its interruption. He didn't look at it. The vibration stopped. The room stayed frozen. One of the rival envoys noticed. His eyes flickered toward the device resting beside the boss's hand. The phone vibrated again. This time longer. He glanced down. Her name. His wife. 4 months pregnant. He let it ring. A subtle shift passed through the room. It wasn't obvious. But in the underworld, nothing ever was. Family was sacred. Bloodline was everything. A king without legacy was a temporary ruler. The phone stopped. He exhaled slowly and continued speaking about ports, territory divisions, percentages. His voice was calm, controlled, unshaken. Then it vibrated a third time. The same name. A pause, just long enough for everyone to notice. He pressed the screen. Silence. Not decline. Just silence. The rival envoy leaned back slightly in his chair. A quiet observation logged away behind unreadable eyes. The deal resumed. But something invisible had shifted. Minutes later, the phone vibrated a fourth time. This one lasted longer than the rest. For a split second, barely visible, his jaw tightened. Still he didn't answer. Instead he stood. "Gentlemen," he said evenly, adjusting his cufflinks, "we are done here." Pens moved. Hands shook. Agreements were sealed. The rival delegation left with polite smiles. But as the elevator doors closed behind them, one of the envoys pulled out his own phone and typed a single message. He chose wrong. Upstairs, the boss finally looked at his screen. For missed calls. One voicemail. He didn't press play. Instead, another figure stepped out from the shadows of the adjoining room. Her perfume arrived before she did. The mistress. Younger. Quieter. Watching him the way people watch storms from behind glass. "You're not going to call her back?" she asked softly. He poured himself a drink. "She worries too much." His tone was dismissive. Controlled. But not entirely steady. The mistress studied him carefully. Not jealous. Not emotional. Observing. "You know what they say," she whispered. "In your world, weakness spreads." He didn't respond. He walked back to the window, overlooking the city he believed he owned. Down below, sirens wailed in the distance. His phone lit up again. But this time, it wasn't her. A known number. He frowned slightly and opened the message. No greeting. No signature. Just 6 words. "You just made your weakest move." The air in the room changed. The mistress saw it in his eyes. For the first time that night, uncertainty. He immediately dialed his home security chief. No answer. He dialed his wife. Straight to voicemail. His jaw hardened. "This city doesn't move without me knowing," he muttered. But somewhere deep inside, something cold began to coil. Across town, inside a dimly lit hospital parking garage, a black sedan idled in silence. Inside the car, a man watched a phone screen. The same message. Delivered successfully. Back in the penthouse, the boss finally pressed play on the voicemail. Static. Breathing. Then her voice. Shaking. "I need you here. Something's wrong." The message cut abruptly. No scream. No explanation. Just silence. He replayed it. Nothing new. Behind him, the mistress slowly stepped backward into shadow. Almost invisible. As if she had already served her purpose. The boss grabbed his coat. Issued 3 rapid-fire commands into his phone. Lock down the house. Trace this number. And find my wife. His empire moved instantly. Cars ignited. Men mobilized. Weapons were checked. But somewhere, someone else was already 3 steps ahead. On the other side of the city, a quiet meeting was taking place. Not between enemies. Between his own captains. And one of them spoke the words no one dared say aloud. A man who ignores his blood can't protect ours. Back in the penthouse, the boss stared at his dark phone screen. It didn't vibrate again. It didn't light up. It just sat there. Silent. Like a decision already made. And for the first time in years, the most feared man in the underworld felt something unfamiliar pressing against his chest. Not fear. Not yet. But the understanding that power doesn't collapse with gunfire. It collapses in moments. Small ones. Missed ones. Ignored ones. He looked at the city again. Still glittering. Still alive. Still his. But somewhere in the darkness below, something had begun. And it started with a call he let die. By sunrise, the city already knew. Not the public. Not the police. But the underworld. Because information in his world didn't travel fast. It circulated. Like blood. And by morning, every captain, every bookmaker, every rival family had heard the whisper. He ignored her calls. 4 of them. Pregnant. Alone. And then, she vanished. Inside the boss's mansion, silence felt heavier than gunfire. Security teams moved in tight formation. Cameras were rechecked. Phone records were pulled. Every guard from the previous night stood in a line across the marble foyer. The boss stood in front of them, eyes unreadable. "Tell me," he said quietly, "what I don't already know." No one spoke. Because in his empire, silence meant survival. Finally, his head of security stepped forward. No breach at the gates. No forced entry. Cameras show her leaving at 11:42 p.m. Alone, the boss asked. The pause. The kind that shifts atmospheres. "There's a vehicle in the frame, sir. Black sedan. Plates obscured." The boss didn't react outwardly. But something behind his eyes darkened. And the footage after? Corrupted. The word echoed like a shot fired in church. Corrupted. Inside his own house. His jaw tightened. No one sabotaged his system without help. Which meant one thing. This wasn't an attack from outside. It was infection. From within. Across the city, in a private cigar lounge, 3 of his captains sat in low light. They weren't plotting. Not yet. They were calculating. A man distracted by desire, one of them muttered, exhaling smoke slowly, "is a man who forgets blood." Another leaned back. The rivals noticed. That envoy smiled too easily last night. The youngest captain remained quiet. Observing. Because he knew something the others didn't. The unknown message sent the night before? It wasn't from a rival. It was sent from inside the organization. Back at the mansion, the mistress sat alone in a guest suite. She hadn't left. Hadn't packed. Hadn't cried. When the boss entered the room, she looked up calmly. "You knew she was calling," he said. Not a question. She nodded slowly. "She called you first." Silence. "How do you know that?" "She thought you'd listen to me." He studied her carefully. "You didn't tell me." Her eyes softened, not with guilt, but something more complicated. "You were busy choosing." The words landed harder than any accusation. He stepped closer. "What aren't you telling me?" She hesitated. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across her face. "She found something," the mistress whispered. His expression sharpened. "Found what?" But before she could answer, his phone rang again. A known number. He answered immediately this time. No greeting. Just breathing. Then a distorted voice. "Your empire isn't cracking because she disappeared." The pause. "It's cracking because they saw you hesitate." The line went dead. He stared at the phone. Hesitate. In his world, hesitation was visible weakness. And weakness was contagious. By afternoon, small disruptions began surfacing. A shipment rerouted without authorization. A warehouse manager refusing to open doors without written confirmation. A mid-level enforcer questioning payment structure. Tiny fractures. But together, they formed something dangerous. His consigliere entered his office without knocking, something he'd never done before. "There's talk," the older man said carefully. "There's always talk. This is different." The boss looked up. "They're questioning legacy." The word hit deeper than he expected. Legacy. His unborn child. His bloodline. "They're asking," the consigliere continued, "if the heir is safe." The boss stood slowly. "Find her." "We're trying." "No," he said coldly. "You're searching." A long silence passed between them. "You think this is about her?" the consigliere finally asked. The boss didn't answer. Because a new thought had begun forming. What if the pregnancy wasn't the target? What if it was the symbol? That night, another package arrived at the mansion gates. No return address. Inside, a single USB drive. No note. No threat. Just silent intention. The boss watched the footage alone. Timestamp, 10:58 p.m., the first missed call. Camera angle, inside his own home office. His wife pacing. Panicked. She wasn't alone. A man stood near the doorway. Face partially obscured. But familiar. Too familiar. The boss leaned closer to the screen. Recognition dawned slowly. Not a rival. Not an outsider. One of his own captains. The youngest one. The observer. The screen cut to black. No struggle shown. No explanation. Just absence. The boss replayed the footage 3 times. Each time, rage grew colder. Not explosive. Strategic. Because now the picture was clearer. This wasn't random. This wasn't emotional. This was architectural. Someone had engineered the perfect fracture. Expose his distraction. Question his loyalty to blood. Trigger internal doubt. And then remove the symbol of his legacy. All without firing a single bullet. He leaned back in his chair, staring into darkness. The mistress's words echoed in his mind. "You were busy choosing." He had chosen. And the underworld had seen it. His phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't unknown. It was one of his captains requesting a private meeting. Urgent. The boss didn't respond immediately. Because for the first time in years, he wasn't sure who was still his. Outside his window, the city lights flickered against the night sky. Still glittering. Still obedient. But beneath that glow, alliances were shifting. Loyalties bending. And somewhere in the shadows, someone was preparing the next move. The empire wasn't under attack. It was being restructured. Without him. And as he sat alone in the dark office, watching the frozen frame of his wife's fearful face, he realized something chilling. The call he let die? That wasn't the mistake. The mistake was believing he was still the only one in control. Fade to black. Rebellions don't begin with gunshots. They begin with silence. And the silence inside the empire was getting louder. By the 3rd day of his wife's disappearance, the boss noticed something he hadn't felt in years. Delay. Orders that once moved like lightning now paused midair. Messages marked read but unanswered. Meetings rescheduled. Loyalty was no longer automatic. It was being weighed. Inside a private warehouse by the docks, he called a mandatory assembly of his captains. No phones. No guards inside. Just blood and rank. The room smelled of oil and salt water. Steel beams overhead. Shadows swallowing the corners. He stood at the center. No raised voice. No visible rage. Just presence. "Someone inside this room," he said calmly, "knows more than they've told me." No one shifted. But he watched their breathing. Measured it. "You've all heard the whispers," he continued. "You think I hesitated." A flicker in one man's eyes. Barely noticeable. But the boss saw it. "The underworld doesn't forgive weakness," he said. "So tell me, who here thinks I'm weak?" Silence. The youngest captain stepped forward. Not aggressively. Confidently. "We don't think you're weak," he said carefully. "We think you're distracted." The word landed harder than an accusation. The room tightened. The boss walked toward him slowly. "Distracted," he repeated. "You ignored 4 calls from your pregnant wife," the young captain said. "Our rivals saw it. Our soldiers saw it. You taught us blood comes first." The implication hung heavy in the air. "You broke your own rule." The boss studied him. This wasn't rebellion. Not openly. It was positioning. "And what would you have done?" the boss asked quietly. "I would have answered." A dangerous answer. The room shifted again, not against the boss, but toward the possibility of an alternative. The boss smiled faintly. Not amused. Calculating. "Loyalty," he said, turning to address them all, "is not tested when everything is stable. It's tested when the throne shakes." "And is it shaking?" another captain asked. There was. The first open crack. The boss's gaze hardened. "Only if you're pushing it." No one spoke after that. But the damage was done. Because doubt had found oxygen. That night, the mistress vanished. Her guest suite was empty. No forced exit. No struggle. Just absence. On the nightstand, a single object remained. A key. Not to the mansion. To a safety deposit box. The boss didn't tell anyone. He went alone. Inside the box were documents. Financial transfers. Encrypted communications. And one devastating truth. The youngest captain had been quietly rerouting small percentages of empire revenue for months. Not enough to alert alarms. Enough to build leverage. Enough to fund loyalty elsewhere. This wasn't spontaneous rebellion. It was patient. Architected. The boss leaned back in the bank's private viewing room, mind racing. The missed calls. The corrupted footage. The message, "You hesitated." It wasn't about removing him overnight. It was about eroding belief. A king falls when people stop believing he deserves the crown. Across the city, in a dim underground lounge, the youngest captain met privately with 2 senior enforcers. "He's unstable," one of them muttered. "He's emotional," said the other. The young captain remained composed. "He's human," he corrected. "And that's the problem." He slid an envelope across the table. Inside, a printed still from the security footage. The boss's wife. And him. The implication was explosive. Not an affair. Not betrayal of marriage. But proximity. Control. "If he loses his heir," one enforcer whispered, "he loses moral authority." The young captain nodded. "Empires don't collapse from outside pressure," he said softly. "They collapse when soldiers question the throne." Back at the mansion, the boss reviewed the bank documents again. Every transfer led to shell accounts. Every shell account linked to silent allies. He could expose it immediately. Execute him. But that would confirm instability. Confirm paranoia. He needed something else. Proof. Of motive. Of intent. Of ultimate betrayal. His phone vibrated. A known number. He answered without hesitation. This time, there was no distorted voice. Just clarity. "You're looking in the wrong direction." The voice was female. Familiar. His wife. Alive. His heart didn't race. It froze. "Where are you?" he demanded. "You still don't understand," she said softly. "This isn't about where I am." The pause. "It's about who you trust." The line went dead. He stood motionless for several seconds. Because now the equation shifted. If she was alive, then her disappearance wasn't a kidnapping. It was strategy. But whose? Was she a victim? Or participant? Had the youngest captain manipulated her? Or had she made a choice of her own? For the first time, the boss felt something more dangerous than anger. Uncertainty. The next morning, an anonymous message was delivered to every captain in the organization. A single sentence. "A council may soon be necessary." The boss didn't send it, which meant someone else was preparing the unthinkable. A leadership review. In mafia culture, that wasn't politics. It was judgment. And judgment often ended in blood. He stood alone in his office, watching the city wake up. Ships moving in the harbor. traffic flowing like veins. His empire still functioned. But underneath, it was shifting. He replayed the youngest captain's words. I would have answered. Would you? Or did you need me not to? The silent rebellion wasn't loud. It wasn't chaotic. It was precise. Strategic. Built on perception. And now he had two enemies. The man positioning for his throne. And the possibility that his own wife had chosen a side. The phone in his hand felt heavier than any weapon he owned. Because this war wouldn't be fought in streets. It would be fought in belief. And belief was already dividing. Fade to black. Pride doesn't announce itself. It disguises itself as control. And the boss still believed he had it. The morning after the anonymous council message spread through his ranks, he made a decision. Not emotional. Not reckless. Strategic. He would remind them who built the throne. By noon, 3 rival operations were hit simultaneously. A warehouse seized. A gambling ring burned to the ground. A shipment intercepted at the docks. Efficient. Ruthless. The message was simple. The king still had teeth. But when reports returned, something felt wrong. No retaliation. No outrage from rival families. No threats. Just silence. Which meant only one thing. They weren't the ones testing him. Inside his own organization, the reaction was colder than expected. The older captains approved of the show of force. But the younger soldiers? They whispered. He's escalating. He's reacting. He's trying to prove something. Prove. That word spread like infection. Back in his office, the boss watched security footage of the raids. Perfect execution. Yet something bothered him. Each operation had been anticipated. Routes cleared too easily. Opposition too light. It was as if someone had quietly warned the rivals. Or worse, used the raids to map his response patterns. His phone buzzed. Not unknown this time. The youngest captain. Permission to speak privately, the message read. The boss stared at it for a long moment. Then replied with a location. An abandoned cathedral his empire once used for discreet negotiations. Neutral ground. The cathedral smelled of dust and forgotten prayers. Light filtered through cracked stained glass, casting fractured colors across stone floors. The boss arrived first. He always did. Minutes later, the youngest captain entered alone. No weapon visible. Confident posture. Calculated calm. You've been busy, the captain said, glancing at the colored light on the floor. Cleaning house, the boss replied evenly. Or burning it down? A dangerous line. The boss stepped closer. You think I don't see what you're doing? The captain didn't flinch. I think you're seeing threats where there are questions. Questions don't reroute funds, the boss said quietly. A flicker. So he knew. The captain nodded slowly. You built this empire on loyalty, he said. But loyalty follows certainty. And you think I've lost it? I think you lost it the night you chose desire over blood. The words echoed against the cathedral walls. For a split second, violence hung in the air. But neither man moved. Because this wasn't about strength. It was about narrative. You're ambitious, the boss said softly. I'm prepared, the captain corrected. The pause. Then the captain delivered something unexpected. She's alive. The boss's expression didn't change. But inside, something shifted. Where? He demanded. She's safe. Safe from who? The captain tilted his head slightly. From becoming leverage. The implication was explosive. You think I'd use my own wife as leverage? The boss asked, voice low. I think you underestimated how others might. Silence stretched between them. Then the captain stepped back. There will be a council, he said calmly. And they'll ask one question. He looked directly into the boss's eyes. Is the throne still stable? Then he turned and walked away. That night, the mistress's empty suite was searched again. Behind a loose panel in the closet, they found something new. A burner phone. Inside it, messages. Between her and the youngest captain. But the messages weren't romantic. They were strategic. Dates. Timelines. The exact hour of the missed calls. The boss stared at the screen. The night wasn't chaos. It was choreography. He had been positioned, distracted deliberately, while perception shifted around him. But one detail unsettled him more than the rest. The earliest message between them was sent months ago, before the pregnancy was announced, before any cracks appeared. This wasn't reaction. It was design. Across the city, in a private dining room guarded by armed men, the rival families gathered quietly. Not to celebrate, not to attack, but to observe. "He's turning on his own," one of them said calmly. "Good," another replied. "A divided empire weakens itself." They weren't orchestrating the collapse. They were waiting for it. Back in the mansion, the boss finally received another call from his wife. Clear line. No distortion. "Why?" he asked immediately. There was no accusation in his voice. Just calculation. "You taught me survival," she said softly. "I protected you." "You protected the empire," she corrected. "Not me." Silence. "You ignored me," she continued. "But everyone else was watching." The words cut deeper than betrayal. "You're with him?" the boss asked. The pause. "I'm with whoever ensures my child survives what's coming." The line went dead. He lowered the phone slowly. For the first time, pride felt heavy. Not empowering. Crippling. Because now he understood. The rebellion wasn't fueled by greed alone. It was fueled by doubt. And doubt had reached his own household. The following morning, formal invitations were delivered across the empire, stamped with the old crest. A council would convene in 3 days. Mandatory attendance. Agenda. Stability of leadership. The boss held the invitation in his hand, reading it twice. He could cancel it, threaten it, eliminate anyone who supported it, but that would confirm everything. So instead, he did something unexpected. He approved it. Because pride demanded he face judgment head-on. Outside his window, storm clouds gathered over the skyline. The city looked different now. Not obedient. Not his. But waiting. And somewhere in that city, his wife. His unborn heir. His ambitious captain. All moving pieces in a game he thought he controlled. The price of pride wasn't paid in money. It was paid in perception. And in 3 days, the underworld would decide whether he was still king, or just a man who let one call reshape his empire, fade to black. Power isn't taken. It's surrendered. And tonight, the underworld gathered to see if their king still deserved his crown. The council chamber was carved beneath the oldest district of the city, a stone hall built long before modern laws existed. No phones allowed. No weapons drawn. Just hierarchy. Just blood. One long table stretched beneath dim hanging lights. At its head sat the boss. Alone. No guards behind him. No advisors whispering in his ear. Across from him, captains, lieutenants, rival observers. And 3 empty chairs. One for his wife. One for the youngest captain. One for fate. The room settled into silence. The eldest of the rival families cleared his throat. "This council is called under one concern," he announced. "Stability." The word echoed like a verdict already written. The boss didn't speak. He let them. Because kings don't defend themselves first. They listen. A senior captain rose slowly. "You built this empire on one principle," the man said. "Blood above all." Murmurs of agreement. "But 3 nights ago," he continued, "you ignored your blood." Every eye shifted toward the boss. For calls. Pregnant wife. Vanished heir. The story had become legend in days. The boss folded his hands calmly on the table. "You think this is about a phone call," he said quietly. "Isn't it?" someone replied. Before he could answer, the heavy doors at the far end of the chamber opened. All heads turned. She walked in. Alive. Composed. Dressed in black. His wife. The room stiffened. Not relief. She didn't look at him at first. She walked to the center of the room. "I requested this council," she said evenly. The words detonated in silence. The boss's expression remained still. But inside, the ground shifted. "You requested it?" the eldest rival asked. "Yes." She finally looked at her husband. "You built an empire that survives on fear," she said. But fear doesn't protect legacy. Stability does. You disappeared, he said calmly. I removed myself, she corrected. A ripple of whispers moved through the chamber. You made yourself leverage, he said. No, she replied. I exposed the cracks. The doors opened again. The youngest captain entered. Alone. Confident. Measured. He took his seat at the table. No one stopped him. Because this wasn't a coup. It was theater. And everyone was watching. You've been preparing for this, the boss said quietly. The captain met his gaze. I've been preparing for the day perception outweighed intimidation. The elder rival leaned forward. Let us be clear, he said. We are not here to remove a king. We are here to confirm one. The implication hung in the air. Prove yourself. Or be replaced. The boss stood slowly. No anger. No shouting. Just gravity. You think I lost control because I let a phone ring, he said. You lost control, the captain replied evenly, because everyone saw you hesitate. A dangerous silence followed. The boss turned his attention to his wife. Were you ever in danger? He asked. She held his gaze. No. Was our child? No. A subtle shift in the room. Then what was this? The captain spoke again. We created a scenario, he said. A test. A collective inhale. You staged my wife's disappearance, the boss said. Yes. You manipulated my empire. Yes. To prove what? The captain's voice was steady. That loyalty to you is loyalty to certainty. And that certainty cracked. The room waited. The boss walked slowly around the table. Not pacing. Circling. You think leadership is about never appearing weak? He asked. It's about never being doubted, the captain replied. The boss stopped behind him. Close enough for the room to feel the tension. Then you've misunderstood something, the boss said softly. The captain didn't turn. You engineered perception, the boss continued. You rerouted funds. You planted distraction. You moved my wife like a chess piece. Silence. But you made one mistake. The captain's jaw tightened slightly. You assumed I wouldn't see the architecture. The boss reached into his coat. Gasps echoed through the chamber. But he didn't pull a weapon. He placed a folder on the table. Inside, printed bank transfers. Encrypted messages. Timeline charts. Every move the captain had made. Documented. You've been building a quiet rebellion for months, the boss said. Not to protect legacy. He leaned closer. But to control it. The captain finally turned. And if I was? He asked calmly. The room held its breath. Because this was the moment. The boss could order execution. End it in blood. Prove dominance. Instead, he did something no one expected. He stepped back. And that, he said clearly, is why you will lead the expansion division. Shock rippled across the chamber. The captain blinked once. Confused. You wanted to test stability? The boss continued. But you think like a ruler. But rulers don't fracture empires from the inside. He turned to address the entire council. They reinforce them. Silence. You exposed perception weaknesses, he said. Now you fix them. The elder rival leaned back slowly. Interest replacing suspicion. And if he refuses? Someone asked. The boss's eyes hardened. Then he confirms this was ambition. The captain held his gaze for several long seconds. A silent war. Finally, he nodded once. Acceptance. Not surrender. Realignment. The boss turned to his wife. You could have told me, he said quietly. You wouldn't have listened, she replied. That landed heavier than any accusation before. He nodded slightly. Acknowledgement. Not defeat. The elder rival stood. Then this council concludes, he said. The throne stands. One by one, chairs scraped against stone floors. Men exited. Judgment passed. No blood spilled. But something fundamental had shifted. As the chamber emptied, only 3 remained. The boss. His wife. The captain. The boss picked up his phone from the table. It vibrated. A known number. He stared at it. Then answered. Silence. Then a new voice. unfamiliar. You survived this one, it said softly. A chill moved through the room. But empires don't fall from one crack. The line went dead. The boss slowly lowered the phone. Outside, beyond the stone walls, the city lights shimmered like they always had. Stable. Glittering. Obedient. But now he understood something deeper. The underworld never forgives weakness. It studies it, waits for it, and tests it again. He looked at the captain, then at his wife, then at the empty throne's seat at the head of the table. Power hadn't been taken. It hadn't been surrendered. It had been redefined. And somewhere in the darkness beyond the city skyline, another test was already beginning. Fade to black.